John.
Are there a set of guidelines or rules that we can use to make, let's say, better decisions on everything, in general? Do you have something, does research say?
Yeah, so there's a couple of things. First of all, task switching is not a good idea, right? So here's what happened. I'll give my case. I'm trying to write something. I'm trying to describe something and I'm stuck. Being stuck is a very unpleasant feeling. And the mind goes to saying, I'm not enjoying this, let's look for something more enjoyable. And reading the news, checking Facebook, whatever is certainly more enjoyable at the moment. And people convince themselves that they will take just a little break and come back refreshed. But there are two mistakes here. The first one is that it's not little, because these platforms are not designed to let us just spend a little bit of time. But the second thing is that they don't really refresh us. So, for example, closing your eyes and meditating or breathing or certainly refreshes people. Social media is not a refreshing activity. It's a little bit like a donut, right? It's a short-term, joyful activity, but it doesn't have the long-term consequences. So people are wrong about the time they would get sucked. They're wrong about the time that it would take them to come back, and they're wrong about what refreshes us. Now, I don't think life should be suffering, right? So people shouldn't keep on doing a task the whole day that they are suffering. But if you think about some rules of productivity, the key is to define to yourself what it is that you want to do and to start doing it first thing in the morning. So I sadly can't do it every day, but when I can, I start the morning by knowing what I want to write and writing that first thing, right? I don't say, let me just check email and then get back to this. Let me just check the news and then get back to this. You do those things, they're very tempting, but it's not a useful thing. So define to yourself what you want to do and start the day with it is incredibly helpful. I also have my coffee ritual. I like coffee. So what I do is I make myself coffee and I connect the coffee and the writing. Right? So this is what I do. But okay, so this is kind of an individual level, right? You can think about all kinds of things like that. I have all my notifications on my phone off. The only thing that I have on is phone calls. If somebody calls me, I know, but the rest of it, I check from time to time, but I don't, there's nothing that is sufficiently urgent that so if true. I don't check every 2 hours, I will miss something. And by the way, let's say I miss some things. How do you weigh the missing something like, maybe there's a party that I missed or, a joke that I'm a little 2 hours late on. You miss something. How do you weigh it against the cost of constant distraction? And if people don't understand the cost of constant distraction. But the reality is that the finding from social science is that it's very hard to change people and much, much easier to change systems. What do I mean by change systems? Imagine we could convince Apple and Google to change the defaults on the notifications, right? Imagine that we could convince Facebook to create some other mechanisms. Those things, if we wanted good behavioral changes, they usually come from changes in the environment, not from now. It's very hard to change the environment. So individuals, we need to think about our individual changes, but the real way to go is to think about what environmental changes we want to make.
Okay. So taking that as the hypothesis, then, if we want to change our behavior, whether that's eating the donut, like we said, checking social media, if that's the first thing I do in the morning is wake up, get a Dunkin', go to Dunkin' Donuts. I'm just trying to picture this person. It's sad, but there's probably quite a few people. I mean, they're probably having sugar and things that aren't good for their body first, and then also checking, social media, maybe something that's bad for your brain, right? So you're off to a horrible start, right, in the day, in your first 30 minutes after waking up. But to go with that understanding, you're saying the best way to change me, if I want to change or modify my behavior entirely, would be to change my environment. If I could just rip out. So I'm just trying to think of a way that I would, modify this, in a more practical sense for someone who is training or whatever.
So even if imagine that every time you woke up, an approach you have now and you don't like it. You wake up and you have a donut and spend the first 2 hours of the day checking on all the amazing things that's happening on social media that you just couldn't live without. And the good news is that if you stopped it for 2 months, life will be very different. In fact, we did some studies in which we got people to stop notifications, and they had very tough 2 weeks. But after that, things got much better, right? Including quality of sleep and so on, right? So, not sleeping with the phone. I mean, there's lots of things like that. So that's number one. Is practice is on our side, but we need to practice. But the other thing about changing the environment is, how do you structure your life? I would arrange for a tray of fresh donuts to be delivered to your house. So you open, you got up, you got to your kitchen, and there was just a dozen fresh donuts in all flavor waiting there. I'm not saying that you would succumb every day, and I'm not saying you'll eat all 12, but let's just agree that by the end of the year you would be worse off.
Sure.
Yeah. So the question is, how do we not buy donuts from the beginning? What else can we do to structure our environment? Now, if you think about sports, especially professional sports, one of the things that is really helpful is you have a coach. Somebody tells you what to do, right? It's not as if, imagine there was no coach, that every day you would wake up and you would decide how much to practice. Not as good. You have team members. They're also incredibly helpful, right? You encourage each other. There's social norms are developing. You work together. Now, it's very hard to find an individual coach, and it's very hard to do everything in team. But these are two more examples of things that help us. If you can exercise with a friend, if you can have a buddy that you report to, if you have somebody that you are accountable for, all of those things make a big difference.